Good afternoon, everyone. It's very cool to have you all here. I say cool because unfortunately Melbourne, where I am presenting for you today from, has turned cool. It's done that thing where it gives you that glimpse of spring, Melbourne, and just says, how good's this? And you go, oh, isn't this a fantastic place to live? I'm going to really enjoy this spring and summer. And then bang, we're back to a little bit of winter. So a bit gloomy here today. I hope it's a little sunnier perhaps where you are. We're going to have a bit of a chat today through this notion of leading practice breakthroughs. It's a bit of I had it pointed out to me that it's a bit of an unusual title for a webinar. I was having a chat with one of our partner principals just the other day when I was in her school, and she said, oh, your next webinar is going to be a bit interesting. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, the practice breakthrough one. She goes, yeah, I've never seen a webinar on that topic before. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I just haven't seen that word breakthrough being used before as something that we would do. She goes, but I would like some. I would like to be able to have some breakthroughs happen in with some of the staff members that I have in my school. And I said, oh, okay, so that's good that I'm hopefully hitting on something. And we then went on to a bit of a conversation about how sometimes language confuses people about what we're talking about. And we might, for instance, I guess that notion of a practice breakthrough might have led you to think about performance, may have led you to think about standards, it may have led you to think about difficult conversations. And all of those are topics within themselves, but they're often funneled towards this, I don't know, it's a rather lofty, and maybe it's even sometimes feels an unattainable ambition of just getting that little breakthrough for somebody. So breakthroughs don't need to always be enormous, but on the other side of them, there's some cool stuff. And whether it's massive cool stuff, or whether it's little cool stuff, as leaders, it became evident to me as this conversation went on. As leaders, we just like to be able to have a little repeatable methodology for being able to create those breakthroughs. We'd like to be able to, we understand, I think, that most breakthroughs happen in terms of individuals. And in fact, when I speak to leaders and to leading teams, to executive teams around improvement and change, I speak to the notion that teams really don't change. Individuals change. And as a result, the collective of the team view or the team product changes as a result of the individuals moving forward. So I think that's really important that we focus back towards the individual. And this conversation went on a little longer. And this principal, who I won't name, and I won't name the person she was talking about either, but she said, yeah, she said, because, I've got one as well that I would like a breakthrough with. It was kind of causing her a little bit of challenge, and we agreed that, okay, we would make today practical. So she said, can you please make this webinar, not like full of big theories and full of implementables that are not implementable. She said, I don't want to see too many big models on the screen, and I don't want to see, lots of readings that I need to go to, and I don't want to know about mindset, she said. And I thought, that's really interesting. And she said, I want practical. She said, I want stuff that I can put on the tool belt and that I can use when I'm working with individuals, that I can pull out at the right moment to be able to use that tool to be able to get that breakthrough. And I use that conversation as the lens for building this webinar. I want today to be really practical, and what I've come up with today is 8 ways that you can start to move forward. So in terms of starting to move forward, I want to acknowledge that sometimes it is getting a little carried away, the notion that I can build these breakthroughs right across your school, or that you can generate these breakthroughs right across your school, because it feels like sometimes you're on a rocking horse. And I had it pointed out to me once that, worrying is like sitting on a rocking horse. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And it reminded me that rocking horses don't go anywhere, and that sometimes that's how it can feel when you're working with certain staff members, that you're putting a lot of effort in, and it's giving you something to do, conducting performance conversations, filling out various performance improvement templates, but we're not getting anywhere. And what I think that's about is that we're losing the human element in this. We're misunderstanding, or perhaps not paying attention to the human transformation that we want to take place here. We'd like to take that rocking horse, and instead of just dragging it forward, because there's a lot of work in dragging something forward that's not geared to be moving forward, we want to change the capacity. We want to take those little arches off the bottom of the rocking horse to unleash what's underneath. We want it to actually change the person. And when I talk to the notion of being able to change teams through changing people one at a time, it's not about turning them into something that wasn't already there. It's the rocking horse into what you can see as the shadow of the Mustang there, of being able to, just unleash for people what is inside them as latent potential. And I think that if we can pay attention to the human element here when we're talking about creating practice breakthroughs, that we can get somewhere. And again, that's where that conversation with my partner principal led to this notion of the humanness of creating practice breakthroughs is what's important. It's not about the content. It's not about the standards. It's not about the template or whether we set the right goals or targets in our performance processes. It's the humanness. And she said, yes, she said, because I've got a Bob. And because I started to talk a bit about some of those theories, and she said, I want to know the theories. She said, because, all the theories in the world are well and good, but you haven't met Bob. And we had a good chuckle about Bob and the fact that every school's got a Bob. And that's very true. And so I guess a couple of things about Bob. One is that all the theories, and even all the strategies, the 8 strategies that I'm going to outline for you today, are applicable and are useful sometimes until they're in the way of Bob. So I would love you to seize the opportunity today to make this webinar perhaps even a little less about how you lead practice breakthroughs and a little more about Bob. So if you do have a Bob and you would like to throw a what if into the equation today, I really want to encourage you to step forward. I know full well, and I know that people who have been familiar with my webinars will know that I'm a bit of a broken record about this, but I know full well that your question will be of value not only to yourself if you can get it answered in some way, but you'll be of value to the room. You'll be of value to every single person who's registered for this webinar today if you will step forward and ask a question. So a couple of ways you can do that. First of all, use the question box, or the chat box as it may look like on your software version of the GoToWebinar control panel. Have a look for those little boxes. They're there. I will periodically keep a little eye on. I'm just going to even have a look in there now. Sometimes that can change your view for just a moment, but no questions yet. All right. So you can ask a question in there, particularly if it's about the content of the webinar. We can help with that. We have the wonderful Chris online today, my business manager. So even if you're having a little bit of difficulty accessing the webinar today, pop a question in there. Chris is really good at being able to attend to those little techie issues that I have absolutely no idea about when it comes to technology. I can be a Bob. And I would really love to be able to have that happen. Now, the other way that you can step forward, should you be feeling a little extra brave today, is that you can even put your hand up. Regular old school classroom today just happens to be online. There's a little palm button that you can see on your GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to put it up. I, again, will be keeping a little eye out on the control panel there to see if anybody has their hand up. Tony Smith, I want to point out to you that your hand is up at the moment. If that's not deliberate, put it down. Well done, Tony. Well played. And if you do put your hand up, I'm able to unmute you from this end. You can even speak to us if you're sitting at your laptop. You've got a leadership team together. I know a lot of people watch these webinars as a team. And so if you've got a question that you want to ask, again, I think you're a service not only to yourself but the room, and that you can, be of benefit that way if you want to get involved. So I want to encourage you. Let's make this webinar about Bob, not just about this leading practice breakthrough theory that I might have. So first of all, let's get to know you. Let's find out what seat you're sitting in today. So what I'm going to do is launch a little poll here. And I would love to know what the seat is that you're sitting in today. It helps me, I guess, to be able to do a little bit of differentiation in a webinar, to be able to just get an idea of where you're coming from today. If I get a sense of the room, then I can understand where I need to pitch some of this material as we go. I try really hard not to have a completely set format, because I think when you do a webinar, there's a temptation sometimes to feel like you're watching a movie or watching a TV show. It's not the way I want it to be. So I really want to encourage you, if you would, just to give me an idea of which best indicates your current role. I do like to get the voting up above 80%, so I've got a good idea of the room. We're at 63% at the moment, and I've got I'm not getting a theme today anyway, but I shall live with that. We've got a real spread of people in the room today. All right, I'm back up over 80% now, so let me close the poll. I'm going to share the results so you can see who's in the room today. Quite a cohort of assistant principals. Why I gave a chuckle was at one stage there we had no system leaders, but we had 25% of the of everybody in the room was principal, assistant principal, leading teacher, or aspiring leader. So we had a real smattering there. So we can see that there is a fair spread of people in different leadership roles in the room today. The good part is, like I said, it doesn't matter. Today's less about what the formal part of creating a practice breakthrough is all about, and it's a little more about what the human element is. How do you construct conversations where people see the opportunity to break through? So let's hide those results, and I'm just going to get back into the presentation and move us on. And I'm going to return to this wonderful picture of potentially hungover teacher hiding at his desk while the rest of the class runs amok. And what I want to know from you now is what is it about your Bob that you would like to get fixed? So I'm going to launch this poll. So what is it about getting a breakthrough with that potentially reluctant staff member to break through that you would like a little bit of help with? Is it that they struggle to see the problems in their practice? So they kind of are only, you see a lot of problems, but they're not aware that they're there. Is it that they blame the students or parents for failing to achieve? So I do find it's a rather blunt assessment, that one, isn't it? But I do find this colloquially and in conversation, a lot of people say to me, yeah, I'd love to be able to get this person to improve, but they constantly tell me that they can't do it because of the kids. They can't do it because of the socioeconomic background of the kids. The parents don't help, or I'm being undermined in some way. Is it because they have excuses not to be able to tackle practice challenges? There's reasons, it's a personality thing, it's just not in me, it's just not what I'm like. Is it that they're not bought in? Is it that they just haven't really gone, you know what, the school's going in this direction and I want to help them row. I want to do my bit to move forward. Is it because they're kind of reluctant to step into a school's vision? Or is it that plainly they turn it back on you and they say, that's not in my job description, it's in yours. I don't have to do that. That's someone else's job. And it's fun. The thing I find quite funny and curious about that is that often the people who are saying these things to us are pointing out that it's not in their job description, it's in yours, but it's not in your job description. So I want you to have just a little think about what best describes your Bob, your challenge in terms of your practice in your school, and give me a vote on that if you would. I'm going to wait just a couple more seconds because I've just got just over half of the people have put their vote in today. Let's see if we can get a couple more people in just to get a fair idea. Yeah, really interesting results starting to come through here. Okay, I'll leave it there and I'll close the poll. Again, I'll share those results with you. I can see again a fair smattering. It's about a buy-in issue, and that's going to go really directly to the first thing that I'm going to speak with you about today. So that's quite an interesting thing for me to bob up, is how you maximise buy-in with people. And then I guess we've got those unique challenges around struggling to see the problems in their own practice. We're going to address that today in point 2 that I get to when I bring up the old philosopher Socrates today. Blaming others is a really important thing to know what's going on there. Often a shame response when you get people who are blaming other people. They know that there's a problem, so what they like to do is to get themselves distant from the source of that shame. People feel really embarrassed when things aren't working in their practice, and sometimes one of the things that they do, and we learn this in the restorative practices research that I'm often speaking to people about, is they place other people between themselves and the impetus for that embarrassment or shame, because then you can get busy whacking them, you can get busy blaming them for the situation, and then you get the whole JD description there's bobbing up a fair bit as well, that it's not in my job description, it's in yours. It's always someone else's job. All right, so let's see what we can do about trying to make it their job. Let me hide those results as well. I like to get this sequence right, otherwise GoToWebinar does tend to freeze up a little bit on me and won't move on. Hopefully the slide has moved on for you and you're fully cognizant now of what's on the screen. And if you are, then you've got a picture of a fellow called Simon Sinek. So point number 1 that I want to make to you today, out of my 8 things that you can put on your tool belt to be able to build those practice breakthroughs, is to make sure that whenever you're looking to ask someone to change the way they practice, that we give them a very good reason for it, that we sell them on the why. In his acclaimed TED Talk, Sinek speaks to that what you can see him unpacking on the screen there is his his whole TED Talk is about starting with why. And he's unpacking here for us the Apple sales model. And what he says, the reason that so many people jumped over to having Apple tools, and I'm a convert. I'm sitting here today presenting to you at a MacBook Pro. So it's the reason that most people have jumped over into it is they understand Apple's why, or at least they've been influenced by it. So Sinek points out the difference between, for instance, a telemarketer ringing up your house at 6:30 when you're having dinner and saying, you know, we make computers, do you want to buy one? And the truth is that nobody in this webinar has bought one, because the truth is why? Why would you? And Apple said that they realised that was the problem. Why would you, if you're just trying to get, force feed computers and technology to people? So Apple actually speak first of all and always to their why. And why do Apple exist? Apple exists because they want people to enjoy technology, and they want technology to change and improve people's lives. They want it to make it easier for people. And you'll notice that in Apple's ads, they almost never show the technology. All they show is people being happy and using the technology. So whether they're just silhouettes of people dancing with headphones in because they're enjoying the music, or sometimes recently they've gone towards showing you photos that have been taken on iPhones, because they're not showing the actual iPhone. They don't want you to be sold by that. They want you to be sold by what it can do for you. And so their why is that whole thing about making life easier and enjoyable for people. How do they do it? When you speak to Apple and go and look up their website, how do they do it? They say they bring together the world's cleverest people when it comes to technology, and they place no limits on what they can do. What do they do? And they only let you know the what once we've established why and how. What we do is we sell computers, tablets, and phones. Would you like one? And you can see that because we know the story around the why and the how, we're far more inclined to take action, to take the action that the people at Apple would like us to do, which is to shell out $3,000 for a MacBook Pro. So what we need to do if we want people to move forward is not just tell them what it is we need to change, not just tell them how it is we want them to change, but we need to tell them why. We need to paint for them a picture of a better future. So it's one thing to describe a current state, to describe a current problem that we see. It's another to spend an equal amount of time painting the picture of the desired state. And the desired state needs to be something that is appealing to them. It needs to be something that goes, yeah, actually, I'd like to deal. I'd like that to happen. So let's now talk about the what and the how once we've agreed that this is a place that we would like to go to. Myself as a principal, I remember, when I was speaking even to my whole staff, if I needed to introduce something new, the metaphor that I had in my head for taking this step was that I needed to paint the picture of educational Tahiti in their head. I needed to make it really clear to people that this was a really good idea, that this is worth doing, that your effort is well placed when it's geared towards trying to get ourselves to sitting on the beach educationally and enjoying a margarita. So it was really important to me to make sure that my people were fully cognizant and fully aware that this is a journey worth taking before I asked them to take any steps. So that's just a critical first step for us. I think that when we're thinking about what we're going to say to Bob, we often think about how we're going to couch the what or the how of the change we're looking for him to make, but we're not unpacking or painting that picture of how much better it's going to be for Bob when we get there. We need buy-in. And this goes to this notion of why so many people, when I launched that poll before, 29% of you who are in the webinar today said the reason you're here is because Bob's not bought in. So how is it that we can establish buy-in? And it's first of all, have conversation with them about why it is a change that's worth making first. What's the benefit? What's in it for you? WIIFY. What's in it for you? And if we can explain that question, then we can start to get somewhere. The second thing I want you to do, and the second tool that I want you to put on your belt in terms of these practice breakthroughs, is to get Socratic about the way you do performance conversations. I remember, I guess, my case study here as a teacher that I had working with me, and she was awesome. She was a good teacher, really good teacher, and had some significant and obvious strengths. those strengths were around technology, around mathematics, and around innovation. So she was fantastic. She would take our Tournament of the Minds class, a group of students every year, and they would excel. They would do some fantastic stuff, and the kids really enjoyed going to the Tournament of the Mind stuff with her. And the way she was able to use technology in her classroom to engage the students was just at a level that I would say, top 3 to 5% of the educators that I've worked with in terms of using that. But there were a couple of glaring problems for her as well. One is that without technology, her classroom management was rather poor. And it meant that the tech had become a bit of a crutch for her. Kids were spending too long on iPads and perhaps doing a fair bit of stuff on iPads that wasn't particularly geared towards educational growth. And the other thing that was a problem with her was that her program was a dog's breakfast. It was really not much chop at all, and I couldn't make head nor tail of what on earth the program was all about. It was a mess. And whether she presented it in a written form or printed form or an electronic form, I still couldn't work out what was going on with it. There were holes everywhere. And every time I tried to speak to her about what the challenges were, somehow I started with great intention and great strategy about how I would address these issues around classroom management and program, and somehow we ended up talking about Tournament of the Minds, maths and technology. And I remember sitting up late when I knew that her performance conversation was coming along very shortly, and the next day. And I remember sitting up late planning how I was going to say it this time, how it would be better this time. I'm going to use these words. I'm going to make these statements. I'm going to get this in there. I'm not going to allow the conversation to be dragged to the side. And I was still filled with trepidation. So I jumped online, not able to sleep. I jumped up and I turned my computer on and I did a bit of searching around performance conversations, and I saw this tip about get Socratic. And I read into it a little further, and all it said is make 90% of your planning for what are the questions you're going to ask, not what are the statements you're going to make. I went, right. I thought I hadn't put any planning into my questions, only my statements. So I showed up in the meeting the next day and I said, so tell me what you think your strengths are. And she said, and she was very easy, this teacher, to tell me about Tournament of Minds, tech and maths. And then I said, so I have weaknesses. What do you think your weaknesses are? And she said, it's probably my classroom management and the programming. And I almost fell off my chair. The Socratic approach of just ask the right questions is amazingly powerful. People know the answers, but sometimes there's a little shame attached to you noticing before them. And the great part about asking the right question that gets the right answer out is that you can just agree rather than look to bring out something uncomfortable out into the open. And then all of a sudden you're on strategy, you're on moving forward. Two of the strategies that came out of this, first of all, around classroom management, where we talked about who are your classroom management heroes in the school. She was able to identify 2 teachers, and we made sure that she visited for 2 one-hour periods in the rest of that term. She visited those classrooms with the view that each time she would come back with 2 new strategies for us to implement in the classroom. And she had 8 new strategies, a significant impact upon her classroom management. And my job was to follow up, 1, to make sure she was released, and 2, to make sure that she was feeling good about implementing those strategies, that she was feeling supported to do that. And the second thing we needed to do around a program was just get her a little bit of one-on-one mentoring with our assistant principal, who was chiefly in charge of that programming, had a great idea about what the programming should look like, and she just needed some conversation that wasn't in the whole group where she felt embarrassed to ask a silly question, so that she could get that going. 6 hours of being released, 6 hours of strong investment in her growth that significantly tackled the key areas that we needed to work on. That's a breakthrough. That's a breakthrough because it created positive momentum for her in a direction that she needed to be heading in. Really important stuff. The next thing I want you to think about is to harness your black hatters. Now, there's a difference between people who are looking to undermine a breakthrough that you want to make in your school and people who are wearing de bono's black hat. So black hatters see the problems or the things they don't like in the things you're trying to do, which is in itself a fantastic skill. A horribly infuriating and annoying skill. So what I want you to do is to see it as a skill and not a hindrance, and to say, how is it that I could harness their wonderful ability to provide that black hat thinking for us? Oh, what does that look like? Again, and I hope you're noticing that I'm sort of leaving some names out today because I'm using so many anecdotes from my own experience. But another teacher that I had was wearing, I would say, the darkest of the blackest of the black hats. Whenever I got up in a staff meeting and introduced my new change that we were going to make, or an addition that we were going to, or a path we were going to start to walk down, and I was doing my Simon Sinek best. I was painting educational Tahiti with all the colours I had available to me. There was one teacher on my staff who would shoot it down immediately, and it drove me absolutely bonkers, to the point where I remember being about to introduce something really important to the staff and having a moment where I genuinely considered not presenting it, because I just thought, she's going to rip this to pieces and I'm going to feel embarrassed in front of everybody, and I don't want to pick a fight with her publicly, and I don't know what to do, maybe I just won't bother. What negative and defeatist thinking I was allowing to creep into my leadership at that point. I went home and had a bit of a think about it, and I had the opportunity to go, okay, I think that it's a de bono black hatter. How could I help her to get that black hat thinking into a positive, into this in a positive way? And I realised what I needed to do. The reason that I was bringing an argument out through the black hat was that I was ambushing her. I was landing this on her out of the blue. And when things land in her lap out of the blue, she sees the negative, she sees the problems. So I needed to give her time to see the goodness in it. So I started to email her my plans, my little brief, my little one-pager about what I was looking to do, my implementation strategy. Started to email it to her 2 or 3 days before the staff meeting. And I would say, could you get back to me with anything that you see in this that is useful for me, that you think is useful for me to know? And I'd often get emails that started with the sentence, I used to marvel at this happening 2 or 3 times, that started with the sentence, Adam, this is all pretty good, but. and then she would give me 2 or 3 dot points that were the points she was going to make in the staff meeting if she was ambushed with this. She wasn't going to speak to the all well and good. She was just going to speak to the dot points of the black hat things that she saw that was wrong with it. And what I realised the first time I got this email back was a rather inconvenient truth. It was that she was right. The 2 or 3 points that she raised with me were absolutely valid. And I was able to go and adjust my plan, adjust my implementation strategy with those 2 or 3 things in mind, and allowed me to use her black hat ability to see things as a strength. The secondary breakthrough that we got from it was that once we actually presented it at the staff meeting, all of a sudden this staff member was jumping up and speaking to the positives of the plan because she had ownership over it. So instead of me seeing it as a negative and a criticism for her, I was actually able to build her ownership into the plan we were trying to implement, by flipping her criticism into a strength and a key component of what we were looking to do. In terms of breakthrough, how does this generate breakthrough? Her ability to take ownership of these key whole school implementations that we were embarking upon meant that within 2 years she'd gone and applied for a senior teacher position and had been successful in it. And across that 2 years, I've been able to reveal my plan to her, and she'd been able to use that as a reflection of her ability to be able to step in a positive rather than a negative way when other people who didn't have the benefit of my experience hadn't been able to notice that she didn't like being ambushed. So harnessing your black hatters is incredibly important. The next thing I want you to do is to use strength-based language. What we see about Bob, what we see about the problems in our staff members, and this goes to the notion of when I said before that people struggle to see that first option that you had on the last poll, where it was those people that struggle to see the problems in their own practice. It's because most of us tend to not look at our own practice through the lens of negativity. We take our practice amazingly personally. And so looking at it through the lens of negativity is to look at ourselves negatively. It's not something that we're comfortable to do, not something that we step willingly into. In fact, we do it very reluctantly. I point out to people that if you want to talk to someone about their arrogance, you better be careful, because the person you're about to speak to about their arrogant, the arrogant approach to the way that they, for instance, conduct themselves in team meetings, doesn't know they're arrogant. You know, you've had 6 people come to you and complain about their arrogance, but they don't know. Arrogant people rarely view themselves as being arrogant. I'm wondering if you can think for a second. I might give you an opportunity here just to use the question box or the chat box in your go-to webinar panel. Just give me a one-word. How do you think people who are arrogant view themselves? What's the word that these people would use to describe themselves? I'll make a public fuss over the first person in here in the webinar today. We had 70 people register for the webinar today, so I know you're out there. What does an arrogant person view themselves as? Marie, I want to thank you for jumping in with knowledgeable. Yes, Ray also says knowledgeable but skillful. Kevin says they're correct. They're just right about everything. Yeah, I agree. And these are all frames that we would use positively. The one that I often speak to is that arrogant people see themselves as being confident. Tony, great work. You've jumped in with the correct answer there. Okay, they see themselves as being confident. And what you can do is take a 2-step approach when you use strength-based language to speak to them. Is first of all speak to them, I've noticed that you're a very confident person about your practice and about your opinions about the way we should be moving forward at the school. And people can agree with that statement. If you walk up to them and say, you know, I'd like to talk to you about how arrogant you've been towards everybody, they will disagree with that statement, and it's very difficult to move forward. But once you get agreement around, I've noticed that you're a very confident person, yeah, I am. I think that, I think I've got a bit of a grasp on what's going on around here. You can ask a question about impact, which means that you can say to them with a secondary question, have you ever thought about how that amazing confidence can sometimes rub off on other people? Oh, not really. And when they do, they sometimes realise, I guess it could come across as arrogance. And then you're able to say to them, yeah, I've had a couple of people come and talk to me about the impact that it's had on them. And let's see if we can have a yarn about a couple of shifts you might make to be able to reduce that impact, or, even make it a positive one. So strength-based language allows you to be able to get off on the right foot. So if you were to think about other issues that you may have to speak to Bob about, it could be, for instance, that Bob's lazy. Bob keeps coming to work every day, at the latest possible time that you could make a criticism of him. Bob doesn't know he's lazy. So if we go to Bob and say that he's lazy, we don't know where to go from there because we get disagreement. But if we go to Bob and talk about his fantastic laid-back attitude, then we can talk about how that might sometimes come across to other people. So lazy people think they're laid back. Arrogant people think they're confident. And if we can frame the conversation, commence the conversation in terms of strength, we've got a better chance of progressing towards the strategy, which obviously once we can get some success around strategy, we can get that practice breakthrough. Now, sometimes that strategy that I'm speaking to here that we do in this instance doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It doesn't feel massive. But the thing to remember is that we're all on either, and this is something that behavioural scientists speak to a lot, we're all on positive or negative behavioural spirals. So a lot of people speak to the ABC methodology of behaviour, which A is the antecedent, B is the behaviour, and C is the consequence. And in schools, particularly in the way we deal with students, we often jump in too late between B and C. We jump, once the behaviour's happened, somewhere along there we apply the consequence, so that's where our intervention exists. What we forget, though, is that the consequence becomes the next A. It becomes the next antecedent for the behaviour. And if that consequence is negative, the conditions in which the next behaviour is going to happen are negative, the likelihood is that behaviour will be negative, and that's a downward spiral. What we would like to do is to create a positive upward spiral. So even though the strategy that might come out of a strength-based language conversation about arrogance or laziness might be quite small, what it means is that you are able to put them on a positive spiral. If they do one small positive thing, then you're able to thank and congratulate them, which builds trust. And it's funny, this whole thing, we would all like to be working in high trust environments. The most simple, number one strategy if you're looking to build trust is to create opportunities to thank and congratulate your people. That's what builds trust. So, letting them know that they're doing something that you value is incredibly important if you want trust. So we've got to create the circumstances in which they will do things that we can thank and congratulate them for, however big or small. And sometimes that positive spiral that you're able to get people on, when the positive behaviour results in a positive consequence, the consequence becomes the next antecedent for the next behaviour. It means the likelihood of positivity increases as we go. Means that they sometimes do additional things that we haven't directed them to that are positive, and sometimes along the trip they do things that aren't so small. They do some really fantastic stuff that we would describe as being a breakthrough. It happened when we weren't looking, but it's something you undoubtedly started through your commitment to a strength-based conversation with them. The next thing I want you to do, and oh boy, is to control the expectations. When it comes to people moving forward, or a big plan that you have for your school, if you're looking to get a whole team bought in, for instance, now out of my 8 points that I'm bringing to you today, there are I'm always using this metaphor that I really do firmly believe that every leader has a superpower and every leader has a kryptonite. My superpower is to explain the why. I'm great on the vision for educational Tahiti. My kryptonite's this one: controlling expectations. I paint such a good picture of where we're going that when we're not there within 2 weeks, people are really disappointed. And it's because I haven't scaffolded or put in place a timeline for people that they can feel comfortable with. People really want to go to Tahiti, but if you tell them that they're going to be there tomorrow and they're not, then all of a sudden they've gone from being your champions to your anchors, because they're incredibly frustrated that you're not delivering on your promises. So controlling expectations is about putting timelines and milestones in play, putting markers there so that people know they've made progress, scaffolding the journey forward. Now, we encourage our teachers to scaffold journeys forward, both for individual students and for their class. Yet it's funny, as leaders, we just forget to do it sometimes. If I go back to the performance conversation that I spoke about before on the Get Socratic slide, one of the most successful things I did, and it was a little bit by accident, was that we made the targets that she was working towards very specific. It was, did she go and visit those teachers, and did she have the 2 mentoring sessions with the assistant principal? Each time she did, I was able to thank her, congratulate her, and she was able to see the progress. Highly motivating. People are far more motivated by progress and by achievement than they are by encouragement and praise. So hugely important that we put these scaffolds in place so that people can work through them and see those milestones when they go past them. As leaders, our responsibility is to celebrate the passing of those milestones. Point 6 is to never underestimate the impact of the culture on what you are trying to do. And I guess this is probably my slide that goes to the effectiveness of breakthrough in terms of whole school and whole team. If you're looking to get a significant shift, you have to stop and think about what the culture is of your organisation that you're planting this significant shift in. There is a huge amount in Australian schools of what I would describe program fatigue. And what that is people who are looking over sideways at a program that seems to be the flavour of the month and thinking, wow, that school seems to be having a fat old time with that program. Wouldn't it be great if we brought that program in here? And then we bring the program in and we put it in our culture and we go, let's see what happens here. And then all of a sudden it doesn't work and people don't like it and people get frustrated and we find ourselves going, stupid program, which is ridiculous because it's working well just a few kilometres down the road. The difference is not the geography, the difference is the culture. So, and it's not the program either, it's the culture. So what we need to do is to stop every now and then and look at the culture of the organisation that we're dropping a program or an intervention or a change into. If we want it to thrive, we need to look at the soil and its readiness to take on another program. Sometimes it's not that your culture, for instance, is toxic and is going to destroy that program. It's just that it's already feeding enough crops. The soil's already feeding enough plants and it doesn't have room, it doesn't have the nutrients in it to sustain another crop or another program. So think a little bit about where it is that you're planting this big change and the likely response that you're going to get from your people. Now, I think this plays out a lot. For instance, if as a leader you go to an innovation conference is a good example. There's a lot of innovation conferences available to people these days, and I always remember going to an innovation conference and coming back to my staff and telling them that I've been to an innovation conference and there's a couple of things I learned from it that could really help us around here. And I watched every single pair of eyes in that room roll backward. They didn't, there could have been some really good ideas there, But the culture was full of things that I had already implemented. They just didn't have room. They were viewing my innovations as additional work. Now, that's a challenge for us in terms of the way everybody views innovation. But the other thing is that it was just a signal to me that for all the best ideas that I had, there just wasn't room at the moment in our culture. So have a look at the soil of your school before you make that big leap that this is a transformation or a change that you're looking to happen. Down to the last couple now. I love this picture. What I want you to do in your culture is and this is what another fabulous TED talk that you might like to go and have a look at from a very educational angle is the one that's world famous by Professor Shigata Mitra, and he speaks to emergent phenomena. And I think that what Mitra is really getting at here is to never forget when you're looking to create the conditions for breakthrough, never forget that bottom-up changes are really awesome, are really cool. They're unexpected, they're surprising, but sometimes they're better than we would ever have possibly imagined. I had the privilege in the Northern Territory to open a brand new school, and I'll never forget that there was a significant challenge put in front of us, and that is that there were some delays with infrastructure and builders and things like that, and we were actually handed the keys to the school about 48 hours before the kids arrived, which was really hard work. We hadn't even put the furniture out or anything like that. It was a unique school, unique architecturally. We were a co-teaching school, so two teachers had to work together. We had intention around cooperative learning and restorative practices and evidence-based programming. And I remember my two prep or transition teachers, as we were calling them in the NT, saying to me as I handed the keys to their classroom over to them, saying, "What do we do? How do we set this up?" And I said, I don't know, but I know that at some stage I'm going to show up in the first few weeks with a clipboard, and I'm going to see if you've got those 4 key pillars for our school in place. And they went, okay, and they walked away. Now, in my head, I had a rough idea of what that classroom could or should look like. What I saw on the Monday morning when those students arrive was pretty diametrically opposite to what I had in my head, and undoubtedly better. Undoubtedly better. And what it was a reminder to me that if you're looking for breakthroughs to happen, sometimes it's not about telling people what that breakthrough needs to be. Sometimes it's not about trying to trick them into understanding the breakthrough that you want them to step into. Sometimes it's not about even just asking the right questions and having them explain the breakthrough. Sometimes it's about putting the conditions in place in which breakthroughs are possible, and then getting the hell out of the way. So making it really clear to people that their creativity is welcome, that their risk is something that you are prepared to support, and that you view your school, and this is a little bit of a Dr. Philism for parenting, that he says that parenting is about providing your kids with a safe place to fall. And I think that's what it's about from a school leadership perspective. If you can encourage your people, if you can have a situation or a staff culture within which your people feel that risk is welcomed and that your job is to give them a safe or a soft place to fall, then we get this emergent phenomena happening. We get bottom-up change, and that's a really exciting opportunity. And I think you can see that those bottom-up changes are often, those emergent phenomena are often quite radical, and that's what breakthroughs are. Breakthroughs are the other side of something that's potentially boring, potentially being done to death, potentially a habit of life that's no longer serving us. And the other side of it is a 180 switch, like those teachers I'd spoken about before. It is diametrically opposite to what's going on. So create room and create opportunity for those changes to happen is something that I think a really effective leader will always do. And then finally, what I want you to do is, I guess if you are looking to build a breakthrough opportunity for somebody, and you're looking to do it in a conversation around performance of some kind, I know that everybody out there, and I know that we've got people today online from all over Australia, every different state and territory. We have people on the webinar from today, which is incredibly exciting. But also what I want to do is point out to you that, and I know that in each of those jurisdictions you've got your own templates, but some of the thinking and some of the philosophy with which you hit those templates can be chosen by you. And the types of goals that not only will help people to move forward, but that are interdependent are often the most powerful in creating breakthrough. Interdependent in that they feed each other. It's kind of these three cogs. And if we don't get these three cogs moving together, then then the whole thing seizes up. So the three type of goals that I'm often speaking to people about are professional goals. So these are helping people to get better in their work as an educator, as a teacher, as a staff member, no matter where they are. So it's about, even if it leads them out of your school. So it's about getting better at information technology. It's about getting better at classroom management. It's about getting better at assessment and reporting. Whatever it is, we're going to help them with that goal because it's going to be useful to them wherever they work. Then what you also want in your plans is what we call an operational goal, which means a goal that is geared specifically to what your school is trying to achieve strategically. So it could be about a program that you're implementing. For instance, you could be a first steps writing school, and you've got somebody who's just landed in your school who has no real working understanding of first steps. So, okay, that's an operational goal. We're going to help you with that by putting you in a coaching arrangement with somebody who's been working on this for the last 3 years. We're going to help you to move forward with something that's important while you're working here. Now, those two goals, professional and operational goals, are not going to be unfamiliar to you. They're the goals that we often work with. They're the goals that we often set for people. But the reason that these three cogs don't spin is because sometimes we forget the personal. And I spoke to you today at the very beginning of the webinar about not forgetting the personal imperative, not forgetting the human element within trying to build practice breakthroughs. And I find it so beneficial to incorporate personal goals. The oddest personal goal that I had. And I always try to, yes, I will help with a personal goal if I can say with some sort of conviction that there's a little bit of work relevance there. Now, I remember a staff member coming to me and saying that his personal goal was that he wanted to quit smoking. And I said, struggling a little bit with the work relevance here. Tell me why I should help you quit smoking. And he said, I'm new to the school. And he said, and you have a rule at the school that not only can I not smoke on the site, so we didn't have a smoking area for our staff, but my rule was that you couldn't smoke anywhere that any person with 1 foot on our campus could see you smoke. You have to go away if you want to smoke. And he said, so I go away. He said, so I jump in the car at recess and at lunchtime, and I duck off down the road, and I have a couple of quick gaspers, and then I rush back in time that I can be back in my class by the time that the next period's about to begin. I went, okay. And he said, and that means I miss every conversation in the staff room about how people are doing their work, about how they're getting through with this kid, about how they're implementing this program, about how they're getting past little barriers in their work. I'm missing it all. And I went, wow, there is some work relevance there. So I took on that notion of helping him with his personal goals. I said, how can I help? He goes, just stay on my back. And so every Friday morning, this staff member got an email from me, because I put it in my diary, about how many cigarettes he had during that week. And he would say, yeah, I've had a pretty good week. Thanks for asking. I had 8 little weekly reminders in my diary for Fridays of 8 different staff members with different personal goals, some around fitness to make sure that they had some energy at the school, some about relationships with other people in the school. And every Friday morning I sat there, and it took me about 20 minutes to send out those 8 personal goal reminders of people that just wanted me to stay in touch and to stay on their back about those personal goals. They wanted me to help them to stay accountable to those personal goals. I'm wondering if you're seeing the relevance here, that if we have personal goals spinning, that the likelihood of that teacher who's being helped around something as strange as quitting smoking, I wonder if you're seeing that the likelihood of them committing to their professional and operational goals is higher. And that's where this thing starts to spin. That's where the cogs don't stop and the whole machine grinds to a halt. And the other thing I want to point out just very briefly here is the importance of those binary targets. A goal might be to get better at classroom management. A target is what we set with our teacher on strategy number 2 around getting Socratic, which was to visit 2 classroom management heroes for 2 one-hour sessions so they could collect 8 strategies, 2 sessions at a time. because it's binary in that you did it or you didn't. When we set a target such as get better at classroom management, how do we know? How do we know whether you did it or you didn't? So I think practice breakthroughs exist on the other side of setting interdependent goals, being clear that these three types of goals feed each other. And then once you do set those goals, making the targets within those goals binary. You have to do them or you didn't. And if you didn't, it's okay. We don't want this to be a source of shame. We just want to say, what was that all about? And how is it that we could make an adjustment to make sure that they happen the next time around? And I think that if you can do these things, not only can you get a sound improvement agenda happening in your school, but on the other side of it, you could even get some breakthroughs. Hey, a final word here about a couple of things that you can do to step forward in this space. Where at the moment, I want to welcome a couple of schools that have signed on just in the last week or so. Where I guess two different schools have signed to work in partnership with Assumption College in Victoria, a prestigious independent school that has done some wonderful stuff for a long time and is looking to step forward through restorative practices and through leading themselves into becoming a genuinely restorative school, which is exciting. So welcome aboard to Assumption, and also Durack Primary School up in the Northern Territory. I'm so excited to have Durack on because it's the school that my kids went to when I was living up in Darwin. Gloomy days like this in Melbourne are days that I sometimes wish I was back up in the NT. But so excited to have, this is the time of year when schools really are thinking about stepping forward. And if working on that culture of your school appeals, then I do want you to note that we have a handout section in the GoToWebinar control panel, and you're able to download this little flyer that you can see on the screen here. If it's of interest to you, have a look at it, give us a call, drop us an email, bottom little tile there on the bottom right-hand side of this flyer. If the notion of working like Assumption College or Durack Primary School on culture appeals to you, and to be honest, we're incredibly proud of the achievements that our partner schools are making, then feel free to download that and get in touch with us. Another thing that you can do, is download the slide deck. So the slide deck from this webinar today, those 8 tools, I don't want you to forget them. So download the slide deck from today, download that partnership flyer, and then if you just want to have a chat today about anything to do with partnership or membership or the coaching work that we do with schools or any of the other services, we have an online program for teachers that can really help build those practice breakthroughs. I had a teacher the other day in one of our partner schools at Ilham College, an Islamic school here in Melbourne, tell me that the Teacher Fast Track program had done a couple of things for her. It had completely transformed her model for the way she was working, and it also allowed her to be able to get a breakthrough with a student that she felt was about to drive her out of the teaching profession. And I nearly had a little tear in the eye, to be honest, thinking about that. It was an amazing moment to know that a piece of our online learning geared, this 12-month online program is geared towards your graduate or new to profession teachers. So if there's anything that you'd like to chat about there, just put the word chat in the question box. We'll follow up with you on there. Thank you. I can see a few people have done that straight away. We'll reach out to you and make that conversation happen. So the last thing I want to do is just do the little scan. I want to have a look through to see if anyone's hand's up. I want to see if there's anyone else who wants to have a chat or has a question. I'll give you just a moment to do that. While I do, the next webinar we've got on, I've had some really cool guest presenters come on and do our webinars for real schools, and they add an amazing level of value to the webinars. I've not been as excited about a guest presenter as I am about having Tracy Ezard work with us in November. Tracy's work, and there's an overlap between Tracy and I's work. Tracy works explicitly on school culture and what does it look like to create a culture where people genuinely work in collaboration, where there's a glue between the leadership and the staff of the school that's unbreakable. In fact, Tracy's book on the subject is called Glue. She's a wonderful speaker, a learned educator, an inspiration, and she's a friend and colleague. And you're going to get a link after the webinar today to register for Tracy, the webinar with Tracy on Tuesday. So keep that one in mind, that the next one will be on a Tuesday. We had to move it just because to be honest, I was prepared to move from our usual time slot to get Tracy involved. She's amazing. And I know you're going to really enjoy what she's got to teach us around authentic collaboration in schools. Collaboration, I guess, for me, is one of those words that can get a little overdone in schools. And Tracy's vision around making that collaboration authentic is one that you just, to be honest, you just can't miss out on. So please come along to that one, and encourage your other leaders in your school to get along to that one as well. You're going to get great benefit from the investment of an hour of your time. All right, we'll leave it there for today, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along. Here's how you get in touch with us if you really want to. And if you don't, that's all good too, because we'll see you next month for Tracy Azard's webinar on authentic collaboration. Have a great month, everyone. Enjoy all of what term 4 is no doubt throwing at you. And we'll speak to you all again very soon. Okay, bye for now.